I wasn't from HR when I was having my kid during that time. The company decided not to have me together with their journey. That was a moment that really matters to me. Because of that, I found the opportunity because I wanted to make a difference. And the difference that I want to make is really go into HR, making sure that other people will not have the same experience as me. But also at the same time, once I get into the HR space, I never look back. I just love being in HR because you say human resources, but it's also really human that you interact. How do you create that moment that matters for the people?
Welcome to the HR Impact Show, where we have honest conversations with global people leaders about their experience creating incredible workplaces. My name is Fung. I'm the VP of Customer Success here at EngageRocket, and I'll be your host for our conversation today. EngageRocket is a HR technology and advisory company that leverages data to enhance employee experience from hire to retire. Today, our guest is Dawn Wong. Dawn has over 20 years of experience shaping people strategy across a diverse set of organizations, from dynamic startups to global multinational companies. She is truly a chameleon of HR expertise. She's worked in tech, e-commerce, manufacturing, retail, and now with creative and media. At Vaynermedia, she is the head of people and experience across APAC, and her mission is to build the world's most human-centric organization of all time, with a culture of empathy, inclusivity, and a focus on creating moments that matter for all talents across all backgrounds. Welcome to the show, Dawn.
Thank you for having me.
So if you don't mind, for the sake of our guests that are listening in today, if you could share a little bit about your history in HR, because you've been to a lot of different organizations, different sort of culture, different sizes from MNCs to startup, as well as across a variety of industries. What has inspired you to go down this path, and share some early experiences that has led to your philosophy of people management?
I started my HR career 16 years ago because of my son. He's already 16, and then so that's why my career is already like 16 years old. So I have gone through quite a fair bit of industry. I started off basically from like manufacturing, sales, and then thereafter going into e-commerce, technology, and now media and creative. Very lucky that I'm able to drive a lot of different industry as a whole. I wasn't from HR when I was having my kid during that time. The company decided not to have me together with their journey. That was a moment that really matters to me. Because of that, I found the opportunity because I wanted to make a difference. And the difference that I want to make is really go into HR, to making sure that other people will not have the same experience as me. But also at the same time, once I get into the HR space, I never look back. I just love being in HR because you say human resources, but it's also really human that you interact. How do you create that moment that matters for the people? In terms of leadership, I've met with a lot of different kind of leadership. And during that point of time is always about what you learn from the leadership. What are traits that you learn from them? What are the things that you also do decide not to learn from them as well? Right? Life is a journey of learning. That was a huge part of my life. Every day I'm doing the same thing. Every minute, every people that I interact. Yeah, so that's how my career in HR started.
Thank you for sharing. I can imagine it was quite a challenging situation that you had to go through that's worked out for the better. It is definitely a challenging situation, I think, for any woman to consider thinking about how would having a child impact your career. It's a huge conversation. So do you have any advice for either women in that mindset, thinking about it, or even for people in general who have to navigate a major career change? What advice would you have for someone in that scenario?
Think I would probably give advice to two groups instead of just also the talents that are females. As an organization, I do believe that you need diversity in the company. You need diverse viewpoints. People are not defined by their genders. How do they perform? How do they interact with other people? And I think that's a big part. There is a misconception that like, oh, okay, if we are going to hire somebody that just got married or somebody that have been married for many years and then they may start a family, what will be the implications and all this? I talked to my team quite a fair bit about that as well, because when we go through our hiring, it's a very important thought that you have to understand. Sometimes it's also learning for leaders, organization, hiring managers around it. One example is that we found a good candidate. We want the candidate to go through the interviews. The candidate is heavily pregnant. And then we see that there is skill sets that we want and also opportunity for hiring managers to understand that. We blind the profile, and then after that, we get the profile to go ahead to the hiring managers. And the hiring manager obviously have to define some of the skill set may not match and all this. But I think the biggest takeaway was the hiring manager was telling me that some of the skill set may not match. That is still fine. But also, do you know that she's going to give birth in 2 months' time? And then I say, yes, of course, we know that. Does that make a difference? And then I think at that point of time, I don't have to explain the answer, but the hiring manager understands. And this is a learning of itself. I do think that whether regardless you are a woman or not, honestly speaking, in some organization, it could be a more challenging environment. But as a company, you have the responsibility to create and cultivate the environment for the people that is for a diverse group of people, not particularly for a specific group.
Really good to hear that is some of the practices that some of the organizations are instilling in terms of their hiring process. Definitely very key. So, given that understanding that you have worked through and worked with a lot of different kinds of people, could you share what is common across all of the different sides of organizations or industries that you work within?
The first thing that comes into mind, I would think that people want to be heard. People want to be heard in many different forms. I have gone through organization that is manufacturing. People are more conservative. To people that is in technology, they are more vocal. And to people that is in the media and creative, that they are more outgoing. But at the end of the day, I think that single commonality is that people wanting to be heard, people wanting to work in a good environment that help them to strive. This one have never changed. And who are the change agent that can make the difference? And that goes back to why I love being in HR, because we work with leaders, we work with a lot of fantastic talents. Everyone, as long as they have the same goals, the same vision, things can be created. It's not just only, for example, having a survey. I do also find that a lot of times, yes, survey is great, but it's also periodic and it's more structured. But I also find that a lot of conversations that is very random and you will just out of the blue connecting with the people. Those are really moments that you find out more from the individuals. People that is a little bit more shy from that conversation, they are much more open to do that. We use Slack. So sometimes I have a lot of random thoughts about people. When I think about the person, I would send a message and say, hey, how are you? How's everything going? That kind of keeps you connect with people that you don't have to structurally need to be with.
So it sounds like you're someone that prioritizes getting to know people, empathizing with them. How do you draw the line between not giving too much, yet at the same time making sure that your employees feel heard and feel like they're cared for?
So my philosophy in my career or my life or me being a mother is really creating moments that matters. I sound like a broken record, but I feel like this is true essence because it helps you to build connections when the people know that you genuinely care. Candidly speaking, how I speak to people, you have to know and understand and truly care for that person. Understanding the receiver, are they being heard? It's a fine line. You are representing an organization. However, you can still be a human. The way you communicate, the way you show care, show that there is good intent in what you are giving as advisor. I also like to position myself when I speak to individuals. I do have my HR hat because that's where the compliance and all this comes about. However, I will do my best to find whether there's any other choices around it that is able to support the individual. And that's where my human head also comes in. A different kind of human. One is with the professional side. The other, as a human being, what do you do? And I always jokingly talk to, for example, when I interview people for my team, I tell them, being in my team, we have fun. We are a very tight team, a close team. We learn together, we laugh together. But also at the same time, it's not the easiest HR role that you will be in because moments that matters to people, right? You have to put in that extra effort in it. So I think on that end is, yes, there is going to be a fine line. But then if you're able to share those traits and so forth, and explain the rationale of how an organization, on our standpoint, but as a human, how that is like as well.
There's a lot to learn and gather from what you're sharing. Do you have any practical advice for be it HR leaders or people managers to also drive that kind of perspective? Are there some strategies or ways that you've been able to have it click with people that you could share or advise other people to also follow suit?
I can perhaps give an example of performance management. A lot of leaders, a lot of managers struggle with it because people generally have fear how to provide that feedback. Obviously, if you have a tool, you have collective feedback. But then when you have to do it for one single person, the emotion, the perspective, and the uncertainty of how that conversation will come about can get somebody anxiety. I always give that analogy to my team and also people managers. And that goes into the concept of let's be kind to people and not just being nice. What's that difference? When it comes to performance management, being nice is even though the individual is not doing well, you say that, yeah, you'll be fine. You can do well. I think that soon you will get a promotion. That's being nice. However, in reality, when it comes time that you have to evaluate the individual, it doesn't add up. But being kind is having that kind candor to have that conversation at the initial stage when you already pick up some cues saying that this person may be struggling in certain things that he or she is doing. How do you pick up those cues and create opportunity and experimenting it, providing that exposure to re-emphasize, to double down the effort to see, is that person really struggling? Having a team, having your direct reports is not the easiest thing, but how do you create that? The individual may not be the star in an organization, but that doesn't mean that person cannot thrive in another organization as well. So I think is to bring the individual, the hiring manager or the leaders, that journey, giving them different perspectives of at the end of the day, it's the person drive their own career. As people managers, I always say that basically you are there to remove blockers for the person. If you are going to be doing what the person is doing, is counterproductive. So again, a lot of things in the works. As manager, you really need to put in the effort to cultivate the team.
It's not an easy job. Being a people manager, kindness and empathy is probably comes hand in hand, because I think kindness can very easily be just niceness if not for the empathy on considering what that person's going to be going through long term. That's why I want to be kind. So I completely agree with you. So now diversity, of course, is something that is fantastic. I think very clearly there's so much we all can learn from each other, and we're only better from learning that, right? What are some practices that you would have seen work to be able to support diversity effectively rather than just hang in and dump everybody in a room and expect everybody to work well together? Are there any practices that you think can facilitate more effective collaboration among diverse groups of people?
I can quote examples within my team because my team is quite diverse. It's intentional to be very diverse as well. The diversity brings in a lot of different lenses. It's great if you get a whole group of highly skilled and senior folks to be in the team. However, what I truly value is that you have a diversity of junior people all the way to people that are highly skilled, because at the end of the day, when you speak to talents, they are of all different levels, and also they bring in different kind of, I would say, skills and perspective. With that end, I think when it comes to diversity is you have to be intentional that you wanted to create that environment. It's not like a quota that you have to, but then how every actions that you do is important. I like the idea that if you talk about every part of talent journey, there could have some drivers that remind you of diversity being an important, for example, recruitment. How do you being intentional that it has to be a balance of both male and female candidates when it comes to certain roles, but then also when it comes to performance conversation, that means like talent planning and all out specific questions around diversity. For example, you have a team that people that have excel of specific gender, for example. And what about the rest? So be intentional to continue to ask that question. In our role, you have to be fearless in a certain way because you have to sometimes ask certain questions that you feel a little bit uncomfortable. But then it will helps you to drive conversation that you do not know where it goes, but also the root cause of certain things. And I like that part of it. When you talk about inclusions, there are many ways for people to feel included. One way that I find it helps when it comes to my team is I'm very intentional that the team is very diverse. Second thing, included. Be very inclusive in the environment. I have team that is happy with me, full-time employees, but I also have a team that are basically vendors, and some of them are freelancers and consultants and contractors and so forth. However, obviously there's a compliance side of things. There are certain things that contractors and freelancers who can't really go into like performance management because they're providing a service. But there are things that you are able to do to get the team together, learning for all. That's why I always emphasize that it's not employees' journey that we are emphasizing. Employees' journey, employees' experience. But I wanted to remind people it's a talent experience and talent journey that we are focusing. And with that, we create pockets of time to be together, to have that fun, that laughter, but also to learn together. Because even though you are contractors or freelancers, You also would love to learn. And then to learn together as a team, to feel like you have a community to go into, I think that is a very special feeling. And that create that stickiness. In our company, we call it the honey empire. The honey is the culture part of it. And the empire is business side of that. I love this word, the honey empire. That is how we balance that side of business and humans.
Earlier, when we're talking about what are very common traits across employees, across industries, whatever size of organizations, you said that one of the more common things, or the most common thing, is that everybody wants to be heard, everybody wants to grow. So clearly, listening to your employees is a very crucial part of HR, a crucial part of talent management. How do you at Vaynermedia keep the pulse on what is going on in your employees and checking in with their sentiment, getting a sense of how they're doing? What are some ways that you do this at Vaynermedia?
Yeah, having conversation is important. I can share with you my journey when I first started out in Vaynermedia, coming out of COVID. And then being a first time in this industry is like entirely different from how the technology is. We are talking to creatives. We are talking to people that they are so good in what they are because they have so much in them when it comes to emotions, how they connect with people, and topics. I still remember only the first month I was going into that virtual APAC tour, I call it. That means it's just have 15 minutes with every single person in the company. I really wanted to learn why they joined the organization. What makes it a difference that Vaynermedia is actually providing the environment, and also why do they continue to stay with the organization? So I think that was the first time that I have a flavor and colors of how the people working for Vayner things. And it was interesting because from there I learned a lot of what not to do. Because agencies, they do have certain kind of misconception. It depends on how you say it, but the environment can be quite challenging and the people could be at times as well. Also, at the same time, that's the reason why they wanted to join. This morning, when I was doing the interview, I was explaining to the candidate when I hire the leadership coming into Vayner, and when we hire the people that comes to Vayner as well, we wanted to find people that wanted to create a different kind of agencies. Once you create that environment, you naturally will have people gravitate towards it. It's important to be transparent. So I think that was the first flavor that I have when it comes to getting the voices from the people. We do surveys, simple surveys. For example, when we have to move from one location to another, how do we get input from people? What is your preference? What matters to you? Just came out from COVID where everyone was still in that space of virtual. So that helps to get different viewpoints. The time that I felt like I'm really wanting to also make a lot of decision that is data based. That was so important for me. And that's where I reached out to Chitong and Dorothy saying, previously we talked about it back in the previous organization. And I want to do something. And through that conversation, I thought that was very exciting because EngageRocket have evolved so much. And I do like the idea that you can have conversations. That is so important. That's the fundamentals of things. But also, how do you aggregate that information, that data points to paint that picture that is organization wide? And I love that aspect because from there, we can then do a lot of decision activities around it. I do believe that data really tell that story, and it's also the responsibility of people like us to share that data. You can have the most fantastic heat map of how things are, but can you quote certain examples? Can you quote what people on the ground were talking about? Because people sometimes they're apprehensive in terms of saying every single thing, and that's why having and creating the environment that there's a safe space for people to say what they want to say, they know that the tools are being anonymous really plays a part. So I think this sums up the different, I would say, mechanics that I do when it comes to hearing from the people and being in the office as well. I think that is important when you see the people have that conversations, sound bites. I always encourage my team also do that as well. Be intentional, creating that space for that conversations and having the right tool to leverage so that you can get aggregated results does really matters, I think.
I really love that because the idea of you need to have that human qualitative, the conversations, the element of context and understanding what's going on, but still using data to gather general perspectives across the board. You have to marry the two together before you can do anything significant with any piece of information that you get. Because I do think a lot of our clients, or even anybody that generally chooses to do engagement or employee surveys, there is a challenge between, oh, this number, let's say I get a 87% on my engagement score. What do I do to move it to an 88%? Sometimes there's a really focus on scores and how we make sure that this is going green every time versus the idea that we want to have a good understanding of the context of what's going on and really how we can then use the information we're gathering to support our people.
I'm 110% with you on that because I've been in space whereby there are generally organizations that use the tool in such a way that monitor the performance of the people manager instead of going into that space of the collective good. How do you do that? But I think it's also a big part of how do we coach, for example, people leader, people manager to take away that results. What does that results means? How do you are able to equip them with the right way of how to interpret it, how to communicate it back to the team? I think it's part art, part science. And yes, data can do that much, but how do you that qualitative part and that skills, how that rules of engagement has to be clear.
Yeah, it's that kindness again, being kind, being empathetic, putting on your human hat that helps add that additional element to even getting to understand the data in the first place. In your 15-minute conversations that you had with every employee, which is incredible, by the way, you said that you actually learn quite critical things like what not to do or maybe what to do. Are you able to share something you learned either through that process of talking to your 100 plus employees or through quantitative data you've gathered?
Yes, during that time, I think I was being intentional of how that 15 minutes is going to having that value that I can give across, and also how do I making sure and reassuring that individuals of me coming into space, how do we collectively create that environment together? We start off to understand, tell me a little bit about your background. Have you been in an agency? What are the tips you can give me so that I'm helping the organization together with all the rest of you to create this environment? Would love to know more. It's a safe space. They are very freely, oh, okay, this person genuinely wanting to learn or not telling me what I have to do. I think that's the part that is important. And once the other party, the receiver, understand, okay, this person genuinely want to learn and want to create a better environment, I have people to feel more settled to share more. And it was interesting because I asked them to give me examples. I asked them what makes a difference between Vaynermedia and other agencies that you have gone into. It was so interesting because 98% of them, I would say, because it was just only a very small group of people that did not talk about like people at all. But 98% is like, it's the culture, it's the people. Examples such as in agencies that they have worked with, if they fall sick, they will still have people contacting them. So yes, but the deadline is by 6 p.m. Can you deliver that? But then over here, I'm not in the weeds of how they do things, but they would tell me saying that it's very special to find a place whereby people will generally come and ask you, can I help you? Can you just go and rest? This may sound small, but then it's small moments that matters to people. And I love that because if we are small, we can cultivate that. We just need to create much more mechanics to make sure that this stays consistent. I probably won't be able to hold that when the organization goes bigger. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we can't try. If we want that environment and culture to be there, everyone plays a part. And every leadership, every people manager also plays a part. When I went into this role, one of the biggest part is how do we elevate people managers, people leaders? How do we elevate them so that they are able to amplify the things that we truly believe in? That's why when we were using EngageRocket, we did the people manager survey. I thought that was very important because this will open up conversations, letting the individual knows that, oh, okay, you are still on a journey. It's okay. We are with you on that journey, but these are the data. And then after that, it's start to spark conversation. The conversation such as like, which are the part that you think it could be a challenge when it comes to conversations, or being a people leader can be quite a lonely journey at times. What are the things that are cultivating your community? How do you take that balance?
There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom in what you're sharing. The idea to be humble. I think the fact that you came to those conversations with humility and wanting to learn from the employees, as opposed to sometimes leaders come in with a my way or the highway sort of perspective. Coming into that conversation, wanting to co-create the employee experience with your employees, that's probably very refreshing for a lot of the employees as well. I like what you talk about how culture and people is what 98% of your employees brought up. Indeed, definitely very important. And I really hope that our listeners also hear that and accept it in heart that people and culture is really important to business, regardless of what everything else is going on. There's one big thing I want to take away from this conversation moving forward. If I'm ever in your position or likewise, I also think I would want to try to do that 15-minute conversation with employees. That sounds such a great way to get to know a workplace as well as what your employees are looking for. Maybe now we'll pivot to talk about the future on our minds with AI and all of these new technologies coming to play and how all of that will interact in a workplace. How would you define your ideal workplace of the future?
Oh, big topic. I spoke in one of the event about the gig economy, and I think this is going to flourish so much bigger. Looking back into my career, everyone was a lot of emphasis in terms of full-time engagements and having the stability in terms of the job. These days, very different. People wanting to hop from one place to another, have that diverse portfolio of experiences. And it was very interesting because I have hiring managers that may come to my team and say, I don't think this profile will work because this person go from one organization to another on a yearly basis. However, I see this as an opportunity. It could be controversial, but then hear me out on that. Very interesting because I come from like a Japanese organization background whereby people like lifetime or long-term employments, but moving forward, or even it has already been happening. And this is what I usually interview my team as well. I always tell them saying that, yes, you may have people that hop from one place to another, but what you are missing is that opportunity that you're bringing in somebody with such a diverse experience in a lot of the company culture that they have been in and also the skill set that they've. A lot of the skills are based on the experience that you have. You can have people that going into startup all the way to big corporations. You have a lot of takeaway. The time is not a fixed index for you to have that judgment of individual. We don't look in terms of academic. We look in terms of whether they have the culture fit plus culture add. That is very important because for me, fundamentally, that will be the layer of culture fit. Because if you come in and there is none of it, it's very hard to change that person. Or rather, I want that person to come in with their authentic self coming in. But that person also have to bring in that culture add bit to it. Because I think that's where the environment is gonna flourish and become very interesting with that diversity, all this coming in. The future of the workplace is that more people are going to do it because they see values in terms of it. The future of the workplace is also organization will be much more open to it. You know like how organization will do measure, okay, you have fixed term employees, you have full times and all this. You definitely will see so much more because people from Gen Z during the COVID period, it could be their first job. They have never gone into a professional workplace. And then with that concept, their workplace are very much different. Going into an organization, what they learn, what they take away, and how they layer their lens, their experience, and all this really matters. I wanted to make sure that everyone come into, for example, my team, that they bring in something. It does not matter how long you stay with the organization. I would love for you to stay as long as you can, but at the same time, is what you are able to leverage and what you can do matters. It's not about the length of time you stay. That's why I think the gig economy is going to go bigger. People want to have that agility, flexibility in terms of what they do, the variety of projects they can take on is going to increase because I was doing research and all this data tells and it's the truth around it.
I'm curious to understand, you also talk about how your own team, you have contract workers, you have mixed. I think 50% of your team is not even full-time workers. I understand that there is higher demand in the younger generation to have flexibility, agility, like you were saying. But a lot of our institutions, a lot of our organizations aren't really set up to enable different kinds of work arrangements. So what can organizations do to facilitate that better?
So in media and creative industry, we hire a lot of contractors and freelancers. And that's why to me it's very important to focus in the talent experience and the talent journey versus just employee itself. Some organization may not prepare for it. To be honest, we started back in 2019 and it was just very small with two people and then you grow to a much bigger organization. Me coming in and the rest of the leadership, the people that come in, we start building that. But do you have the intent to create that? If you have the intention to create, not just by saying it, but how do you start thinking and making it to happen? That means, for example, when it comes to the people experience team, when we wanted to hire, we also being intentional of hiring people that is much more open to, for example, contracted freelancers. When we propose for certain roles, we have to be intentional in terms of securing talents that is more shorter term because that is a requirement and so forth. It's doable. And we come a long way, 3.5 years around there. First thing first, as an organization, you have the responsibility to ensure there is compliance because you're running a business. And then thereafter, you create your framework, you create your structures, and then thereafter, you bring in the people. And how do you be intentional to bring in the variety of people that you're looking for? Start small. Start from, okay, you're not sure how to do up contracts. It's okay. Be resourceful. Look for organization that can help you to do it. Look for organization that will help you create contracts that will be able to safeguard you as an organization.
Can I understand a little bit more? Because the idea of hiring contract workers or non full time staff, it almost sounds like a supply sort of perspective, right? That is what new joiners might want, is what Gen Zs might want. They want the agility, they want the flexibility. So organizations should also start considering how we can support them to be able to meet those expectations. What is in it for the organization to open up their perspective? Because all of this still requires change management to enable that into the organization. What do you think is in it for an organization to open up their perspectives of different kinds of work arrangements?
The environment is very agile. When it comes to business, you have to be agile as a business as well, which means a business is run by a bunch of talents, creating that agility in the business so that in every context and business cycle, they have that flexibility to do it. I think that whole mindset of people have to work with you forever, yes, is great. But is it really great for the organization? Is it great to have much more diverse viewpoint from new people joining the organization, bringing in different values? I think it's not all about organizations. It's about the talent as well. The talent may experience so much more in other organizations that they go through. I have the most fantastic conversations with people that come from so diverse background because they have a story to tell. And I love to listen to their stories, what they have learned. And you can also see people that go into that spectrum of being very resourceful, going into a lot of different organizations, they experience so much more than somebody that have been with organization for a very long time, doing super well still. But it's just, I love that part of the experience, the diverse experience that comes with it.
It almost sounds like you're saying don't close off what your ideal talent looks like. Don't close your mind off to the idea that there are potentially a lot of different high value perspectives to be brought into an organization, regardless of whether they've been in a different place for only 1 year, regardless of whether they're looking for a contract or gig style working.
Very similar to early on our conversations about when you see a profile or when you wanted to hire a role, you have already an expectation of how that role is. But if you start to think based on like the skill sets that you are looking for, the perspective will be very different. You are instantly open to so much more instead of just a title, the number of years of experience, and how long that person stays within the organization. Because obviously, hiring manager can ask for that, but then it's also for us to coach them. There are other thoughts beyond this that may help you to think of what talents means to you as well.
So based on skills, not on, I guess, pedigree or not on other elements. I'm looking forward to that workplace of the future too, to be honest. I think that would be really eye-opening for a lot of organizations to think about. Dawn, you've shared a lot of really great things in this conversation. So if there's one overall key takeaway that you want our listeners to get from this conversation, just one thing that you really hope they absorb into their hearts, what would that thing be?
The one biggest takeaway is because my philosophy is always moments that matters to people, but also stay curious. Curiosity is such an important thing in life, not just only when it comes to a professional setting, because curiosity is in terms of systems, in terms of process, in terms of people, how they react to it. If you are staying curious, you are able to ask questions around it, getting first-hand understanding of what the people thinks and feels. How do you bring that goodness back into the thinking process around it? I think it's important because I think the curious ties so much in terms of empathy side of things. And then it will also layer in terms of candor that we talk about, because there will be conversations that will require that element as well.
So now we're coming to some of our guests' favorite part about this conversation. We're going to have what we call the rapid fire section. So I'm going to shoot you a couple of quick questions, and based on your answer, just whatever's top of mind, we'd just love to hear a little bit more about you. What's one thing you wish employees understood about HR?
HR can be fun. After joining Vaynermedia, I really do find it's so interesting how people think about HR because social is at the center of everything we do. And in our organization, on a daily basis, they have something which is a half an hour session to talk about the latest trend in the social media space, the best practices. Through that, I start to get a hang of looking through social media. And from then onwards, I discovered there's a lot of memes, there's a lot of parody around like HR.
There
Give me a
is.
lot of really great ideas around how people think of it. If you flip the coin around, it's also very interesting because it brings conversation. There is a layer of humor, but it's also a layer of how HR professional can change that perception and persona of who we are. We can be very fun people.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably not enough people know about that. I definitely agree. HR can be really fun. So, what is one book that you think every HR professional or leader should read?
I don't read, but I listen. I'm an
Okay,
audiobook
sure.
person. I would say it's Trevor Noah. Until now, I still occasionally think about it. The book is about being resilient. I love how he narrated because he narrate with humor, with authenticity about how he grew up because he's a mix, right? And then so the different cultural aspect of like how he experienced in life, he has to go through many different pivotal moments. I love it because as somebody that is curious about how people interact with one another, how you also coach people through resilience, through agility. This book, I think I would say, bring a lot of essence to it.
It's been on my to read list in a while. What is one people leadership philosophy that you have?
It changed a little bit. I would say it toggled between vulnerable leadership and authentic leadership. I was so curious about vulnerable leadership, especially during the COVID time. I learned a lot around it. Everyone from leadership all the way down in some form or another, you need to bring yourself to lead the organization. Came across leaders that is vulnerable, but the true vulnerable leadership are people that even though in the darkest of time, you are able to lead the people with light. I think it has quite a big impact on me in terms of vulnerable leadership and being authentic. If you're not being authentic, it's very hard to like being vulnerable because it will just come off as very fake. But being authentic and being vulnerable and people understand that you are being genuine is important. So that's why the things that matters to the people and then having that conversation and knowing that you are being not just nice, but being kind and the care does really show when it comes to vulnerable and authentic leadership.
Incredible. Last one, diversity and inclusion or inclusion. If you had to choose one, which would you pick?
This is really hard, but okay. I would say diversity because that's the foundations. If you are being very intentional of creating a diverse environment, inclusion will follow.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for your time today. I think it's been a really insightful conversation, really laid the land for a lot of people like me who are fairly new people leaders wanting to make our mark in the world and trying to make sure that we still lead with empathy, keeping a human-centric cap on regardless of what we do. So thank you again for your time, your expertise, and your heart as well as vulnerability.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to our HR Impact Show. If you have enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasts. You can also subscribe to our community at engagerocket.co/HR Impact. I'll see you in the next episode.